The Truther Girls.
Hi everyone, Truther Girl Sonia here. Well, I'm warning you, what I'm going to talk about now is probably going to be like a pretty cringy topic for especially the guys. So like, guys, get out and click away. No, actually maybe you shouldn't, because you might learn something about the women in your lives. So yeah, but I'm just warning you, like. So first of all, I want to talk about menopause. Not only menopause, but menopause and addiction, which I just Googled last night. I'll tell you why. Menopause is not just a little thing. It's not like, oh, you have some hot flashes, you get a little moody. It can be really heavy. Like for me, it's been like ridiculous. Fatigue, but like heavy fatigue. Brain fog, my nerves are shot. Moodiness, but like ridiculous. Moodiness where you just hit with extremely hard emotions, like right here, like you're stabbed in the chest, like intense emotional pain, loss of interest in things, like loss of ability to feel pleasure and enjoy life, basically depression, and you know, a whole bunch of stuff like that, like really not good. But never mind the physical, but the emotional and the mental, it's been very, very difficult, and it's been going on with me for a few years. It took me a while to realize what was happening, you know. The hot flashes kind of gave me a tip, but I did not realize that it was going to be like this. There's not enough information because it's such a taboo topic. Nobody wants to talk about women getting old. I mean, we're not supposed to get old, right? We're supposed to look young and pretty forever, and like being older as a woman is just totally, it's not okay. It's very taboo. And you're certainly not supposed to admit it and talk about it. But I feel like there's a need because, you know, a lot of us, actually all of us, are going to go through it at some point. And I think that probably a lot of women really suffer and feel alone. And I know for a fact that some women get so depressed that they end their lives. So this is very, very serious. I think also it's very difficult for them to continue functioning the way they did. This is why women in menopause, they start to refuse demands, they start to resent demands, because it gets really difficult to just cope with whatever you were doing before. And it's difficult for the people around them to deal with a person who's becoming like this. I mean, I suppose not everyone goes through it, so it's so rough, but a lot of them do. A lot of us do. So it happens, so I want to talk about it. So menopause and addiction. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because you guys know I have like a distant, well, distant enough drug history. I'm only laughing because, well, it's distant. I mean, my heavy drug use is very distant. I was like in my 20s. I was on some prescription drugs up until about like 7 years ago. Sometimes I think it was a big mistake to get off those prescriptions, because what happened was, you know, after I got off the prescription, sometimes like you have your original withdrawal or whatever, but then later you have a different kind of withdrawal. They call it post-acute withdrawal syndrome, which can last like a couple of years and maybe longer for some people. And I think after I got over the original stuff, I think at some point I dealt with some of that. And then I had all this stuff going on with my son, and I was working very hard on top of that. I went straight into a burnout. And then I was trying to recover from my burnout. I started going straight into menopause, you know? So it was like all this horrible, like piling on like one after the other, you know? And I'm supposed to just cope with all this, right? And just keep going and do everything I did and look good doing it. It was getting harder and harder and harder. And now dealing with menopause. A strange thing was that after, you know, dealing with this for several years in different ways, burnout, depression, menopause, emotional stuff from the hormones, I started feeling like I cannot cope with this. And like, I have been drug-free for 7 years, you know, except for some herbs, not cannabis, but the other herb was kratom, you know, which like I use that a bit here and there, mostly for restless legs and for when I feel like I can't cope. But at 7 years, and I've never turned into like a kratom addict. So, you know, but I consider drug-free anyway. And with the kratom, like sometimes I'll use it for weeks or months, and then I'll leave it alone. Sometimes for like 8-9 months, I won't touch it. Then I'll use a bit when I need it. So the weird thing was that I just recently, I just felt like I cannot cope with this. It seems like no matter what I do, in spite of like going to God about it and trying to keep myself healthy and everything, it's just very, very hard, heavy. And I guess some of the effects of these hormonal changes in my life, they're a lot like what I dealt with after I quit doing drugs. And I looked this up and I found that somebody had made the connection that menopause symptoms are very much like post-acute withdrawal syndrome, because you are basically going through withdrawal from your hormones. And at some point I just started feeling like I can't cope, and I you know, doing drugs is really like not an option, but I just started feeling like, you know, I need drugs to cope. Like I even kind of wanted to get back on some of my prescriptions that I was on before, and I thought, oh, they're not even going to give it to me. You know, they're like, what? You've been off them for 7 years. We're not going to start giving you that. And I really don't want to be on pharmaceuticals either. So it was like a huge conflict. But I started feeling like I cannot deal with this, and I started feeling like, you know, I need drugs. I mean, let's just be honest. Like I started feeling like I need drugs. I can't do this. And well, all I did was I just started using more kratom, which I think is okay. I looked up, you know, people having problems with kratom, and it's usually because they use a lot of it. And I really just use it when I need it, and the most is like 2 teaspoons a day, which is like a couple grams a day. So I don't think I'm gonna turn into a kratom junkie, but let's just say I noticed that the way that I feel, it's a state of being that in the past I would have coped with this by using. And I just thought, you know, I wonder how much do women who've had a distant drug history, do they relapse when they're menopausal? Sure enough, and not just with opiates, but with cocaine, because you may have found a way to cope with being sober and be living and like be doing okay, and then this comes and it's just so much that it throws you off balance all over again. And it's because it's not like a day or like a few minutes here and there. It's like every day, all day, you're just coping with like these mood swings and depression and so much stuff, and you have to go so far out of your way to just be able to be okay. Looking for all these herbs that I can use, you know, herbal hormone replacement, maca, trying to fix my diet, trying to exercise, doing all these things, and still it doesn't just go away. It's like it requires maintenance, and it's so daunting. People say, and once you're postmenopausal, you're just sort of managing your postmenopause for the rest of your life. Oh my God, no. No, I mean, like, holy cow, you know? It's very, very daunting to think, no, it's got to get better. And they say it could last 2 years to 10 years. And I realize I've probably already been dealing with this for like 5 years. So how long is this going to go on? And I just want to say that if you're someone who has, sorry about the fly, it got in my house. If you're someone who has a distant drug history, you start getting into those years, I'm warning you. It could be hard. And if you're getting in those years and you're feeling like, wow, I cannot cope, and you're starting to feel like you want to use, not because you want to go back to the lifestyle, but just because you're just having so much difficulty coping, well, you're not alone. Apparently it's a thing. So I'm trying to deal with this. And I know people who still use, and when I see the state they're in and the way they live, like, I'm absolutely do not want to live like that. And I feel like God has changed me a lot to the point where it would be like impossible for me to be the person that I was, you know, to get back into that lifestyle. I couldn't do it. But that doesn't mean that I'm completely like indestructible and infallible, and that you know, it couldn't creep back into my life in some way. So feeling the way I have been, I got a bit freaked out. I got a bit freaked out thinking that you know, that could happen. And so I am using kratom, but like to cope with it, but not like huge amounts. And like I say, I've been using it for a long time, and I think it's an okay way to deal with this, because I don't want to take any prescriptions. But I feel like, well, they're plants. Sorry, I got a phone call. I feel like, they're plants that God gave us to use. So I'm using them, and I'm just trying to use them responsibly. So, yeah, I figure like these plants were put on this planet by God for us to use as medicine. And I feel more okay with that than with going to the pharmacy, even though there's more stigma maybe against using plants that have, opiate properties or psychoactive properties or whatever. Well, you guys are going to see how this turns out, because at this point I feel like I need to use kratom like basically all day, because I cannot cope with this mood swings and stuff. And at the same time, well, why am I not just taking a whole bunch of hormones? Why? Because I believe in the natural process of menopause, and I just want to get through it. So if I just keep taking all these phytoestrogens and stuff, then I'm going to have to deal with this at some point. It's I'm just postponing the inevitable. So what I'm doing though is I'm drinking kratom tea, and it's helping me. But for me right now, it's the only thing that I can do to get me through this. That's how hard the menopause is. So those of you who have women in their lives who are going through this, I just want you to know it's really hard. So, be patient with us, because it's really hard on our end. And yeah. And those of you who are going through it and who have a history of drug use, I don't want to give you advice, but let's say for me the kratom is working. And I'll let you know down the road if that turns into a huge problem, but I don't think it will, because I'm really careful with it. So I just want to tell you that's where I'm at, and that, yeah, it's a real thing, and it's difficult, especially for, those of us who've been through a similar thing before. So anyway, thanks for listening to me. God bless you guys, and I'll see you next time.